still gall darn his eyes a man that ought to consider his mates and the way he goes and dies. Have you ever stood in an Arctic hut in the shadow of the pole with a little coffin and a grief you can't control? Have you ever sat by a frozen corpse that looks at you with a grin and that seems to say, you may try all day, but you'll never jam me in? Well, I'm not the quitting kind, but I never felt so blue as I sat there gazing at that stiff and studying what I had to do. Then I rose. I kicked off the husky dogs that were nosing round about, and I lit a roaring fire in the stove, and I started to thaw Bill out. Well, I thought, and I thought, and I thought for 13 days, but it didn't seem to do no good. His arms and his legs stuck out like pegs, as if they was made of wood. Until at last I said, well, ain't no use. He's froze too hard to thaw. He's obstinate. He won't lie straight. So I guess I got to saw. So I sawed off poor old Bill's arms and legs, and I laid him snug and straight in the little cabin the little coffin he picked himself with the dinky silver plate. And I came near nigh to shedding a tear as I nailed him safely down. Then I stowed him away in my Yukon sleigh, and I started back to town. So I buried him as the contract was, in a narrow grave and deep. And there he's waiting the great cleanup when the judgment sluice heads sweep. And I smoke my pipe, and I meditate in the light of the midnight sun. And sometimes I wonder if they was. I wonder sometimes if they really was, the awful things I done. And as I sit, and as the parson talks, expounding of the law, I often think of poor old Bill and how hard he was to saw. Just thought you ought to know that there's another side to the story, friends. Just thought you ought to know that maybe even you are a little hard to thaw. Maybe you're even harder to saw. Oh, we'll see you tomorrow night at the Limelight, friends. 10:30 until midnight. As the candle glows hot, and as the tissue paper is more exciting by the moment, as those red ribbons fly in the wind, as the Christmas tree looms higher and higher, and tragedy stalks the land. Tomorrow night at the Limelight. This is old One-Eyed Mike here. We'll see you sometime. If you'd like to be buried good, just come around and talk to us.
Okay. We're doing a special snow broadcast. Got hit here in the Mid-Atlantic again. Here it is. Most of the stuff usually ends by February rather. Usually get our biggest snows around Washington's birthday. How can I say it? Every state, government, whatever, has its what's it called? President's Day, I guess you would say. But you look at the federal job or the federal holidays, and it says right there, right there on their websites, whatever, there is no President's Day on the federal calendar. Just the only thing they recognize is Washington's birthday. That's it. There is no President's Day on the federal calendar. So, anyway, now let's see what's up next. The Great Indiana Blizzard. Recorded 16th of January, 1964, with Gene Shepard. And I played this before relatively recently, but hey, it's the perfect day for it. What can I tell you? Alright, now let's get this thing queued up. It's ready to go. Let her rip. Yeah.
come on now. Come on, that's enough of that jazz. Crying out loud. Time is running short. We're all getting closer to the end. We got to get on here. Going. Hey, why do we carry on this myth about it being cold out? What is with this New York idiocy about cold, schmold? Going. I'll sing you some cold weather ballads, Dad, here tonight. No, seriously, this is not even cold at all. Not even remotely cold. And yet, poor old New York sits here. This is the city of dynamic self-pity. How's that for a song lyric? Oh, this is the city of dynamic self-pity. The city that weeps in its beer. Yeah, this city really. I can tell you this, that I talked to my mother in Chicago last week, and at the time I was on the phone with her, she said, "Wait a minute." I said, "How is it, Ma? How's the weather?" And she says, "Oh, all right." And I said, "Well, how is it?" She says, "Oh, well, wait a minute, I'll look out." And so I could hear her cracking the ice as she's looking out between the geraniums, in the kitchen to look at the thermometer that she's got strapped on the windowsill there, with the covered with ice flows. And I could hear her talking, and then she comes back to the phone. She says, "It's about 12 below." I said, "Below zero." She said, "What do you think?" That's just the way it is, And here in New York, there's cold. And the guy on the radio is saying the temperature is now 25 degrees. It's a cold, terrible day, so don't go out, folks. 25 degrees. And this nutty city is the only city in the country yet that's hipped on skiing. What do you think you do? Where do you ski, you nuts? Crying out loud, this is a masochistic city if I ever saw one. On the one hand, they're all screaming, yelling, trying to get in and out of cabs, with hitting each other, trying to get into a heated cab. And those same louts are going up into Vermont, where it's 107 below zero, and busting their ankles. I suppose the next thing guys are going to work out some system where you can use a cab to ski in. Go down the side there with a... Yeah, really a nutty time. I don't like to. It's funny as an old frostbitten Midwesterner. This weather just gets my blood going good. It really does. That a guy who comes out of the wilds of northern Indiana and the whistling prairies of Illinois. It is only at about this time that his radiator begins to really move. Actually, truly, that there are certain elements. That have different melting points, of course. That mercury, under ordinary circumstances, is actually melted. That it is ordinarily a solid. But yes, it is a solid. And during its regular room temperature life, it is melted because it's too hot. Well, this is literally the case with a good Midwesterner, that a Midwesterner does not begin to actually think good until the temperature is around 15 below. And, yes, his overload relay begins to kick in and everything starts to work. He begins to hum and sing and work it out. And I don't know whether I should tell you any really genuine cold weather stories here of that whistling prairie world out there where they really had cold. I'll tell you one night. Now, I don't want to... this is not in the way of nostalgia because it's still cold out there. Of course, you probably heard in the news, and nobody even thinks about it out there. They have news items about it here, but out there it's just the weather report. That there was 30 inches of snow, for example, in the last 5 hours in a town in Wisconsin. 30 inches. Well, I couldn't believe it. This afternoon, I'm hearing Bruce Elliott on, and there's a little piddling little snow coming down, like a little flakes, it's a little brisk, and he's announcing all the places that are closed. They're all closing up over in Jersey, and all the meetings that were scheduled for tonight, they're not going to hold them. Well, I suspect something right away, that those people that are not going, and all those meetings that are closing up, are chickening out and didn't want to be held in the first place. They were looking for the quickest out they could get. And it's a fascinating thing. This is the land of the great cop-out. And the first flake of snow, and the entire school system of Long Island quits and goes home and watches television, which is what it always wanted to do anyway. Why don't you admit it? You're not interested in education out there, Long Island, for crying out loud. You're interested in swinging, making martinis and all that stuff. I know all about Long Island. Staten Island, oh, it's even worse. Terrible, terrible. Well, let me tell you, though, about one night. I remember vividly one particular night. There's a thing that Midwestern winters do that does not really happen here in the East because we have an ocean here. And this ocean is a great tempering body. By that I mean, it acts like a big heater out there during the winter time, and it acts like a big cooler in the summertime. Well, there's no such thing really. The lake is the opposite in the Midwest. That the lake acts like it makes it even colder, because the lake, and I'm talking about Lake Michigan here, is an enormous flue. It really is. It brings the wind unbroken directly down from the Arctic Circle. It sweeps down over Michigan, and it whistles right down that lake, and it screams through the Straits of Mackinac, and whistles past Ludington and Benton Harbor, and it gains steam until finally, as it approaches the southern end of the lake, that wind is howling 150 miles an hour, and boom, it hits the shoreline there, sweeps over Hammond, Gary, and Chicago, and bathes it in what's left over from the Arctic Circle, and you can smell the polar bears. Oh, boy. And it goes down, of course, because of the way it is there, something happens that does not happen here. It is not at all uncommon for the temperature to drop 30 degrees in maybe a half an hour. I mean 30 degrees. Boom, boom, pow, thump. It goes down. I mean, you go out of the house, it's 40 degrees. You walk down, you get in your car, and you start your car. It's fine. The sun is shining. The car's going. And all of a sudden, you see the windshield is clouding over just while you're sitting there. And between grinds of your starter, it is now dropped down to 20. And just as you reach for the third one, it's down to 7 above. And the fourth shot of your starter, it's frozen. It's 10 below. You get out. Oh. I'm not exaggerating, of course, not much more than just maybe 5 degrees, but it really is a fantastic thing. I'll remember this. Now, here's one night. I'm going to give you what happens is this, you see, is because of the precipitous drop and the precipitous fluctuation of weather out there, nobody anymore in Chicago, nobody even talks about the weather. It's just there. Now, a guy who has lived next to the Grand Canyon for 500 years does not exclaim every morning at what a big hole in the ground is out there. He just walks around, and the world is composed of holes in the ground as far as he's concerned. And I can tell you, Arabs are never amazed at how much sand there is in the desert. That's just there. They are never talking about the heat. It is always there. It has always been there, and they don't even know it. And so the temperature may be 130 degrees, and that Sirocco is whistling along, and the wind is flying, and an Arab is just standing around picking his teeth. He's just, it's just an ordinary Wednesday as far as he's concerned. And all the rest of us, what is it? The wind is blowing, and our eyeballs are scorched. Not an Arab. Well, and so it is with the residents of northern Indiana, which get the full blast of that wind howling down the lake and around Chicago. This is why they call it the Windy City, The lake and its juxtaposition with the prairies produces a turbulence. I don't want to go into the meteorological problems here. That means a lot of wind, and it howls and whistles in and out of the Randolph Street station like a banshee gone out of its skull. Well, on good cold winter nights, which generally do not occur in the Midwest until after the first of the year. They're just warming up now. They're just getting set for the winter. Yeah, that's true. Because the lake is a lot of water, it does keep it a little warm out there for a while in the fall. But then when the lake cools off, it cools off with a vengeance like the freezing compartment of a hot point refrigerator. It really cools off, Dad. You can see ice in that lake. Well, walking along by the mill, for example, when I worked in the steel mill, which was built right on the lake. The steel mills are sticking out in the lake. All steel mills are sticking out into the lake because they use the lake for ore shipments, the boats that come down from the Mesabi Iron Range and from way up north that bring in the coal and all so forth, and of course ship out the stuff too after they make it. It is necessary to have water for a steel mill. Well, in January and February, the ice flows on Lake Michigan extend as far as your eye can see. They go maybe 8 or 9 miles. There's a big ice